So here I was in a new job, and I made a commitment to my wife. I will be home for dinner, and we will have family time every night. Well, the way that I was able to make that commitment sticky is I put a block on my calendar. I wouldn't take any calls or meetings after 4:30. Now, some of my colleagues were suspicious of that. How's that going to work? Well, what happened was I made everyone that wanted to get on my calendar kind of conform to my needs rather than the other way around.
This is the Brandon Smith Show, and I'm your host, Brandon Smith, and the entire purpose of this show is one singular thing, and that is to help you live a life that much more free from dysfunction. So today's topic is going to be one that I know, if you're listening to this, you can appreciate: time management. How do we do a better job of managing all the stuff on our plate? How do we do a better job of knowing how to manage it better, and also when to take stuff off? And that becomes even more complicated as we move up in our careers. We get promoted. We've got more responsibility. Got a growing family. We've got more demands on our plate and on our kind of our daily and weekly kind of to-do list. So how do we manage that? So to help us on this journey, I've got my good friend Randy Hain joining us. Randy, always awesome to have you on the show.
And it's always a pleasure.
Yeah, I mean, and you and I talk about this because we deal with this. You coach me on this on a regular basis, and this is stuff that our clients deal with all the time. So anyone who's listened to the show for any period of time will recognize your voice and recognize you on the show. But just for those new listeners, just say a few words about kind of the kind of work that you do, and then we can dive into this topic of time management.
Well, I'm the president of Servian Partners, and I'm an executive coach and leadership consultant, and work with Fortune 500 companies and their leaders and their teams all over Atlanta. And occasionally I travel outside of Atlanta. But we do talk about time management a lot. And I think I need to take my own advice sometimes because it's hard.
It's really hard.
Yeah.
It's really hard.
Yeah.
So the way that we're going to do this show is a little different than the traditional style where I interview a guest. So what I ask you to do is I ask you to come up with your top 5 list. And I've got my top 5 list. And so we're going to kind of take them in order. We're going to start with number 5, then 4, then 3, then 2, then 1, and see kind of where we are similar and where we might be different.
Is there a prize at the end?
I don't know. I think the prize is the listener maybe gets a nugget out of this. And so if you're, as you're listening to this show, I want you to be, thinking about which one of these nuggets resonates most with you. Okay. So Randy, you ready?
Yeah, I am.
Okay. All right. Number 5, drum roll. What's your number 5?
Okay. This is going to make some people very, very nervous. But I would say my number 5 is routinely embrace device-free time and social media blackouts.
Wow.
I want you to think about the enormous time suck that social media can be. I mean, if you're on Twitter for what you think is a minute, it's actually an hour. You've just gone through all these different, tweets. So I just encourage people to designate times where they put their device down, they're not on social media, and they're actually engaged in more productive work. Maybe a conversation with a colleague. Maybe it's developing someone on the team. Maybe it's whiteboarding strategy in your office. Maybe it's time with your family. But I think occasionally putting down our devices and getting off social media is actually a way to save time.
Oh, I like that. I don't have that on my list.
Wow.
Right out of the gate, we got some different ones. Okay, and when you think about that, if you had a client say, all right, I get this, Randy, but what does that look like in practice? What's a starting place that you would say?
I have a true story for you. I work with a C-level executive at a Fortune 100 company. And one of the things that we talked about in one of our very first sessions was his struggle with time management. And it was really affecting his home life and his family life. And he talked to me about how annoyed his wife was getting with him about his inability to turn it off. So I came up with a very practical idea that he actually implemented, and it worked. I asked him to go home and have a date night with his wife. But when they sat down to hand his iPhone over to his wife for the duration of dinner, for the duration of the date itself, and wait until the end to get it back, and ask her to hold him accountable and be responsible for the iPhone. He said it was nerve-wracking, difficult. It was really, really hard for him. But he did it 2 days later, and it got a little easier. And by the time I saw him 2 weeks later, he had done it 3 or 4 times. And he said it's actually been incredibly impactful. So something as simple as letting someone else hold your device actually makes a difference. And that it worked for this client.
Yeah. I did an offsite for a client, a company, a few weeks ago, and they're in a business where there's constantly fires. And so it's a little bit of it's one of those industries that everyone is basically ADD.
Oh yeah.
Just because of the nature of the industry, media, retail, there's a lot of industries that just have that. And so what the CEO had put in place was whenever a senior leadership team comes together, they have a little basket, kind of like you might see passed around at church, and everyone has to put their iPhone in it.
I love it.
Or phone, and then take it. Oh, so many uncomfortable people. So many uncomfortable people. And they would say, wait, you mean you're going to take my phone? I mean, and he had done this before, but they still were kind of like, I can't believe this is happening. But they did it. And so then when I would do breaks during the workshop, I called it a cell phone break. You can check your phone for 2 minutes, and then back in the basket it goes.
But you know what I think this speaks to? I think this is, the topic today is obviously time management, but it's also about managing time wisely. It's not that we're trying to get your listeners to squeeze a ton more productivity out of the day. It's about looking at every minute of the day and be wise in how you apply it, how you use it. Yeah. And giving up your devices is just a form of more effective time management. You'll do something better with that time if you think about it.
Yeah, intentionality.
Yes.
And also, I would hope that the outcome would be lower anxiety.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So you end up saying, I feel a little more like you discussed with that client. They start feeling better about giving away his phone. It didn't feel so anxious. We're anxious all the time, all of us, me in particular.
What's your number 5?
So here we go. You inspired me on this one. Set an end time every day.
Oh, I love it.
So you pick your day, you pick your end of the day where you say, this is where I'm going to turn off, and this is it. No meetings after that, no whatever happens to be. Doesn't mean you can't, log on later after dinner or whatever, but you pick your day, you pick your time of day. So I try to do this, and I try and say 4:30. That's the end. And then when I'm still feeling pretty energized and focused, and I go to the gym until 6, and then I go home and have dinner with my family, and then I might hop back on the computer later afterwards. But I make 4:30 my end. So I don't just keep having meetings. Because what I found was I was taking calls and meetings after that. Then I might go to the gym. Then I might take calls on the way home. And I was just feeling burned out and worn out. So I put that boundary in place.
I love it. I remember when I left Waffle House years ago, when I was an executive there, and I came to Bell Oaks, a small executive search firm. One of the things that I committed to my wife that I would do is I would be home for dinner every night. I had just left a job where I traveled 80%. I was always on an airplane. So here I was in a new job, and I made a commitment to my wife. I will be home for dinner, and we will have family time every night. Well, the way that I was able to make that commitment sticky is I put a block on my calendar. I wouldn't take any calls or meetings after 4:30. Now, some of my colleagues were suspicious of that. How's that going to work? Well, what happened was I made everyone that wanted to get on my calendar kind of conform to my needs rather than the other way around. So when they tried to get a meeting at 4:30, my response was, hey, I'd love to meet with you. I can't actually at 4:30, but tomorrow I'm available at 8, 9, or 3:30. Which one of those options might work for you? So I put that block on that time because that was sacred time, but I offered choices immediately. Now, they were my choices, but I gave options. So I definitely have lived that, and I think it works.
Yeah, and so one more caveat I would give to this. If you're listening to this, you may or may not be in a place where you can do this. Right? If you're more junior and new to a company or role, you can't just tell your boss, I'm sorry, I'm not meeting with that client. But where I think this comes in even more importance is when we start to elevate into those leadership roles. The goal is not work more hours. The goal is work smarter with the time you have. And if you are in a leadership role, then you have a little more control of your calendar. And you can tell everybody, I'm not available after this time because you're in that position. So just, for knowing context matters, but that's my number 5. Okay. So now we're down to number 4. What's your number 4?
Get a handle on meeting madness.
Okay. What do you mean by that?
Every single client, every single team that I work with struggles with dysfunctional business meetings. they're worthless. They run too long. We never get anything done. There's no accountability. And I've written about this. I wrote a piece on my website called Best Practices for Fixing Dysfunctional Business Meetings. But this idea that many of my clients spend 60, 70, 80% of their day in these meetings. Now, granted, we have to have business meetings, but if we could somehow improve this, if you, whoever's listening, can make marginal improvement, say it's 20% better, where you go to fewer meetings, you make them more effective, they're agenda driven, there's accountability after. If you can actually turn that just a little bit, the applause will be deafening. People will be so happy that you've made that change. But for time management, if you can actually get more done with less meetings, I think you'll be a lot happier. So I think getting a handle on meeting madness is really important.
Yeah. So I'm hearing you say make them more efficient and effective.
Yes.
Like
yes.
how do we maybe shorten the time? They don't always have to be an hour.
Right.
For some reason, we've just programmed that a meeting should be an hour. It doesn't have to be. It could be 30 minutes, 20 minutes, 40 minutes. It doesn't have to be an hour.
This is what my clients tell me routinely. We go into a meeting, we have no agenda. We're not exactly sure what we're talking about. We go around the table and everyone kind of voices their opinion. We don't actually attack whatever the problem of the day is. And we walk out with numerous opinions about what needs to be done, but no clear accountability.
I can't stand it.
I mean, that's just like the norm.
I can't stand it.
Yeah, so.
You're making my blood pressure go up, Randy, right now. Because honestly, it feels, when I'm in meetings like that, it feels like I've been like thrown in the back of the car and there's like an unlicensed driver driving it. And I have no idea where we're going. And it's just all over the place. It's not good.
I've had more than a few clients tell me that they equate meeting madness to a root canal. I mean, it's that painful.
Yeah, and everybody suffers from it. So that's great. So another way to pick up and manage our time better is think about how we can do meetings more efficiently and effectively.
Yes.
Okay, here's my number 4. Write down a weekly to-do list.
I love it.
Yeah. Simple, basic, but it's that, just have the discipline to write down a to-do list every week and say, what are the things I need to get done? And then, when they get done, there's that feeling of fulfillment as you scratch it off. And then that's a way to kind of keep you focused and keep you prioritized. What are the big things I have to get done?
Is there a limit to how many things you would put on that list?
The way I do it is I just have a little pad. It's maybe 6 inches tall by 3 inches wide. Okay, so in many ways that limits what I can put on it. And it's a pad. So what I'll do is I'll write. It could be everything from. It could be personal. It could be professional. It could be like one of the things on my list right now is book airline tickets for Disney this June. Like I need to do that. It's family vacation. I got to do that. I lost my passport. I got to go tell folks I lost my passport and start that process again. But there's also, get ready for travel I've got next week with business. So those things are on there. And then I just scratch them off. And then when I'm down to about 2 items left, I just rip off that sheet and start a new sheet and move that item to the next sheet. But it also is a accountability system for me because I start to notice what's the things I keep punting that I keep writing every week. I just move it to the next week. It's like, yeah, you gotta do that.
I do something similar, and I love the concept. But one of the things that I've done is I've always put it on my calendar, and those who help me with my calendar, keep my calendar, become a source of accountability. So I'll have them ask me through the week, how am I kind of doing with the things I put on my action list? So I put everything on my calendar on Monday mornings that I want to get done. And sometimes if things, bleed over, I'll put them on a daily basis. But every Monday I've kind of got my master list. And those who see my calendar get a chance to look at it and ask me about it. So just a little layer of accountability.
I like that. To add another layer just to make it a little, so it's not just you. Other people can get visibility into that. Okay, so we are 4, 3, 2, 1. We are at break. And so when we come back from break, we're going to then move to our number 3s, our number 2s, and then finally our big ones, our number 1s. So stay tuned. When we come back, we're going to continue down our list on time management. We'll be right back. Here's your coaching minute for the week, presented to you by the Leadership Foundry. So building credibility is essential to us as leaders, both in terms of working with our team, but also in terms of building credibility with others. One of the easy ways to do that is to focus on being more responsive. How responsive are you to emails, whether it's from your team or other leaders? That is as a good friend of mine and regular guest on my podcast, John Kim says, responsiveness is cheap currency. And what John means by that is it's really easy to do, but it goes a long way. I had a leader I worked with several years ago, and he would typically respond to emails 4 to 6 weeks after they were sent, and he had no credibility with his team. So here's a challenge for you. Work on your responsiveness. Can you respond to emails within 24 to 48 hours? Now, what that doesn't mean is you have to respond with an answer. It can just simply mean, hey, I got it. I'll get back to you by whatever date. But by focusing on responsiveness, that can enhance your credibility. So give it a try. Welcome back from break. Of course, this is the Brandon Smith Show, and I'm your host, Brandon Smith. And today, I've got my good friend, Randy Hain, on the show, and we are talking about time management. And so, Randy, we're doing our top 5 list. We've already done our number 5s. We've done our number 4s. Now we're on to number 3. So what's your number 3?
This is one that's near and dear to my heart, and I wrote about this on New Year's Eve day. And it's about getting real about all of your priorities, not just work, and then plan your schedule accordingly. So let me tell you what I'm thinking here. I think we're all pretty good about mapping out the work stuff, the obvious work stuff. I've got to get that project done on Friday. I've got to meet with my boss on Tuesday, whatever. We're pretty good at that. But if you ask people, if I ask myself, well, Randy, name all of your priorities. Well, I've got lots of priorities. I've got to go to a doctor visit with my son on Thursday. I've got to take my son to an event Tuesday night. I've got date night with my wife on Wednesday. I've got my physical on Thursday. There are lots of things that actually are important that are priorities. But here's the thing. I think that we plan and put on our calendar all the work priorities, but we give the other important things in our life the scraps that are left over. So the idea here is it goes on your calendar if it's important to you, and you give it the time that it's due. I think way too many of us, myself included, we're really good at the work stuff, but we don't actually plan for the other things. Like I bet if I asked you, you would say that community involvement, supporting causes you care about is important to you. But how much time has that been given to your calendar each week, each month? These are the kinds of things that I think we really could do a better job of. So if it's important, it goes on the calendar.
Yeah, I like that. And I would add one more piece that I've learned to this. I've learned it this year, learned it recently. Get feedback from others on your priorities. So you might have a difference of opinion. So, for example, I've been
talking to my wife.
I wasn't supposed to say it. So, I've been traveling a bunch this year, way more than I had expected. And I've enjoyed it. It's been great. And my assumption has been, well, my kids are older. My daughter's Abby's 17, and then Noah's 14, and then Aaron's 12. I thought, they don't need me around as much anymore. No, that's I've learned. Like, they actually miss me a lot when I'm gone. And they're like, Dad, no, we really miss you. We miss having you around. Emily said the same thing. And so, if I had written my list of priorities, I would have said, stepping up my travels, okay, I'm not as needed. Turns out that would be wrong. So getting some extra feedback is something I learned.
And I think one of the ways to really think through this is going back to your idea about priorities. What if you actually list everything that matters to you? And before you go past the list, plug it into the calendar. And I mean everything. It's the community stuff, it's family stuff, whatever matters to you. Like, I have a real intention this year about developing the people in my network. I've got several people that I mentor. If I don't give that time on the calendar, it's not going to happen. I know my schedule, I know your schedule, but I want that to live. And if I don't make it live, it's just going to be a great idea.
Yeah, totally. Okay, so my number 3. Ties a little bit into your number 4. Okay. Because this has to do with meetings. Okay. And this number 3 is specifically designed for the person who's gotten promoted. So now you've gotten promoted into a manager or senior manager, director level. You've gotten kind of moved up a little bit. So it's to say no, either say no to meetings because you say to yourself, I really don't need to be at that meeting, or delegate one of your direct reports to go to the meeting on your behalf. So rather than you feeling like you have to be at all these meetings, sit down and say, maybe this is a good development opportunity for this person, and she can go on my behalf, or he can go on my behalf, and then report back to the group on what they learned to free up more time.
No, I love that. So, back to your point earlier about where you are in terms of your career. If you're a more junior leader or maybe want to be a leader, how do they do that? How do they do that effectively? How does someone that doesn't feel maybe confident or courageous, how do they say no?
Yeah, that would be tricky to do.
Yeah.
I think it's first you have to start by valuing yourself.
Yes.
And so I'm geeky in this way when I go to meetings. I immediately imagine over everyone's head a little taxi meter. And as soon as the meeting goes, their hourly rate turns on and starts running. So if your hourly rate is $400 an hour, you can ask yourself, should I be at that meeting? Is that a good use of my time? Is that a good use of their resources to have me there? So even a junior person can say, what's my hourly rate, and is this a good use of my time? So I think there's that part of it. The other part is, if rather than saying no, if they're uncomfortable saying no, a way they could kind of thread that needle is to say, if you don't need me there for all of the meeting, maybe I can just come for part of it, where I can add the most value. So you can ask permission to only be there for a part. Because if we were gut level honest, most meetings, we only need to be there for a part of it. And then there's probably another half of the meeting that covers stuff that's completely unrelated to what we're doing. Yet we're sitting there and our meter's running.
Right.
Why? So that could be another way, if you're more junior and don't feel quite empowered to say no, is to do a half no.
There's an old adage that comes to mind. I think it's only do the things that you can do, delegate to others what everybody else can do. And you have to take a hard look in the mirror and say, what is my best and highest use? What is the best use of my time, because I'm on the meter and I'm expensive.
Yeah.
So if I'm going to be involved in it, it needs to be absolutely something that only I can really do.
Yeah.
But I see a lot of high-powered leaders, and you do too, that all gather in a room for 2 hours, and I'm not exactly sure what they've accomplished, but it's just what we do. It's part of the culture. We meet, we get together, but they don't really apply themselves very well.
Yeah.
So
I think so my number 3 is all about meetings and being thoughtful. Don't just go to meetings because you were invited. Okay, so now we're getting close to our top list. So number 2, what's your number 2?
Build air into your schedule.
I've heard you talk about this before.
I'm a big believer in putting air on the calendar. So
say a little bit more about what you mean by that.
Sure. I know so many leaders that I work with, and I have been a victim of this at times, where my schedule is absolutely packed. It's literally meeting, call, meeting, barely have time for lunch, and it's just every day is like that. And yet, we still have to do our jobs. We need to be thoughtful. We need to brainstorm. We need to actually create. And it's very difficult to do that unless you actually are intentional about building air into the calendar. So, my encouragement is to take a hard look at where you're spending your time. Do a calendar audit. Figure out, okay, these are all the places that get my time now. And look at strategic places. And this gives people anxiety, but be very thoughtful about maybe every day I'm going to add 30 minutes to an 8 or 9 hour day of air. And I'm not going to feel guilty about it. I'm going to close my door. I'm going to go and just sit there and work on other things. Or maybe I'm going to go walk around the building. Maybe I'll go spend it with a colleague, but it will not be on just the typical routine stuff. Air can take many forms, but I think this need, especially for introverts, I'm a high-functioning introvert, I don't get my energy from people. And in the afternoon, I need a break. So air can be for the break if you're an introvert.
Yeah.
But I think just this idea that just pull back a little bit. And then I encourage my listeners and my clients to go to an hour after a couple of weeks and see if you can survive that. But most people really benefit from and appreciate this idea of building a little space.
I find lunchtime is a good, easy starting place for people on their calendar. And one thing I would add to this that has not been a form of air for me is commuting and sitting in traffic. So while it may look like air on your calendar because you're not meeting or whatever, that's not restful time. You're typically navigating and fighting and
then you're listening to angry talk radio and it's just awful.
It's not good. Okay, so that was your number 2, right? Okay, my number 2. And this can be true for really anyone. They don't have to be more senior, but I think it's just another good way to start to think about your the value of your time. Outsource activities in your life that you don't want to do. So maybe you get to a place where time's really precious, and you say, I feel fortunate. I'm in a pretty good financial position in my career and life, and I'll just make up something. I don't like mowing the lawn. I actually like mowing the lawn, but let's say you don't like mowing the lawn. You could outsource that and now pick up another couple hours on the weekend instead of you mowing the lawn. Or maybe you hate doing your laundry and you outsource that. Or you ask someone to come help clean your house or apartment once a week. Things that can kind of free up your time that you can use in higher or better uses. Part of going back to your priority list. So now I've got time, I can take on these priorities of mentoring people or spending time with my family or going to the gym because I'm paying someone who is their job to do this.
I love that. And the concept that comes to mind is understanding that time is a finite resource. We only have so much of it. And if you're spending it in things that you're not good at, that frustrate you, that ultimately you're probably going to spend more money doing it than you probably could have by giving it to a professional, those are the kinds of things, to your point, that we should get off our plate. I like to work in my yard. I'm a yard guy, but I can't paint, and I am not handy around the house. We were talking earlier about sharing professionals. I know what I'm good at. I know what I'm not good at. One of the biggest epiphanies for me as a small business owner, in the first, I had a wonderful assistant, and Carol, if you're listening, you are by far just amazing. I'm so grateful that I knew you. But for 13 years, she ran my life. I showed up where Carol told me to show up, and she was phenomenal, the best assistant I've ever had. Well, when I started my business, I said, well, I've got to ease into this, and I'll just manage my own calendar. It was a disaster. I was spending 3 or 4 hours a day managing the calendar and all the appointments I had. So one of the smartest things I did is I got an executive assistant, a virtual assistant. And I am so grateful to you, Jan, and Lori in the past for helping to help my business grow by giving me back those 3 or 4 hours. So you really got to be thoughtful about not only giving up the things that we're not good at, but also that if I make a little investment, it actually can have a huge payoff.
Yeah, it really can. It really can. I remember way back in the day when my kids were little and a little more struggling to make ends meet. We had the deck on the back of our house. I said, I'm going to stain that myself.
I can see the disaster.
So I stained it. Well, it took me 40 hours. I counted 40 hours to stain that deck. With a brush, I just did it by hand. My dad came and helped a little bit. That was kind of good bonding, but 40 hours. Well, 2 years later, it needed to get stained again. So hired a crew to do it. In 3 hours, they got the whole thing stained. And I thought to myself, I'm glad I stained my deck. I'm never going to do that again.
You're the most expensive deck guy I've ever met.
Yeah, exactly. Horrible. I wouldn't hire me. There's so many people who can do it better, quicker. It's better all the way around. And it's their business. You're helping support their family. So kind of everybody wins. All right, so that was my number 2. We're getting close on time. What's your number 1?
It kind of dovetails into something you said earlier, but I just want to say this maybe, and I'll articulate it differently. It's say no. You have to learn to say no. And this is what I mean by just say no. I'm a guy that wants to be helpful, and I want to invest and help and develop and all that stuff. But I go back to this idea, this concept that we only have so much energy and time. And you have to be thoughtful about where you commit. There was a day when I served on every nonprofit that would have me. But today, if it doesn't fit my top 3 causes, I can't serve it because I can't really give you the best of me. I'm very careful about where I say yes to appointments. After 3:30 or 4 in the afternoon, that's my kind of cutoff. I've got other things I'm focused on, family, health, other things. I will not take appointments. My weekends are my own, and I won't say yes to appointments during that time. So learning to say no has been very liberating for me. And it's hard because I want to be helpful. But I think anyone who's listening, if you can find a way to say no a little bit, but understand that it's going to lead to a greater good, you'll put more quality into the time you're spending with others. That's my number 1.
And coaching that you've given me around this too, because I struggle with this too, is you don't have to just flat out say no. You can say no and then offer an alternate solution to that person. I can't do it, but this colleague here would be great.
Yes.
Or here are 3 other referrals. I'm happy to connect you. So you're kind of setting the people up for that. Okay, so here's my number 1.
Okay.
You already kind of said this, so this is where I figured eventually we would start to kind of dovetail.
We've done well so far.
Yeah, and this isn't for everybody. It depends upon kind of where you're at in your career. But if you're at that place in your career where you've gotten yourself in a leadership position, you're feeling pretty established. Time's an issue. Get yourself an executive assistant.
Amen.
Get yourself an executive assistant. Get yourself an executive assistant. Don't use Calendly. That's not an executive assistant. There's a lot of great tools out there that can help you, but it's not the same as having an executive assistant, because an executive assistant can think for you, can be thoughtful about things, and follow up. And, Calendly can't do that. And so you can give them things like you and I. So you and I have shared, Jan supports both of us. And before Jan, it was Lori supported both of us. And there's great talented professionals out there that can be virtual assistants. That doesn't have to be kind of a full-time salaried person. And those people have made my life so much better because they can help with travel, they can help with scheduling meetings and appointments. And so while I'm, recording a podcast with you, there's still work that's being done.
Yes.
And it's just great.
I think the idea that you're talking about is it helps leverage us to our best and highest use. My best and highest use is not scheduling 5 appointments. It's got to be done. It's important work. The business would die without it. But that's not something that I need to spend my time on. I need to be with my client, helping to solve a big problem.
Yep.
I was with a client the other day of a very recognizable Atlanta-based company, C-level executive, and he has always believed, with every fiber of his being, I just think executive assistants are a waste of time. I would never have one. And this guy is a train wreck with his calendar. And we had a very long talk about, how this could leverage him to his best and highest use. I think I've gotten him to agree to at least try it. But he was adamant that, no, I don't want to be that guy with an EA. Well, I want to be that guy with an EA because Jan and Lori and Carol and others have saved my life.
Yeah. And on top of it, I've had people thank me for having an executive assistant because they said, oh my gosh, this made scheduling with you so much easier.
I like to take that as a compliment too.
Yeah, but I mean that's what they're saying is if I had to wait on you,
exactly,
then when am I going to get back to it? Well, probably after dinner, and then I send an email at 8:00, and then they're going to respond back at 10 a.m. the next day, and then I might not be able to respond back till 3, and so then 2 or 3 days pass until we start to get something on the calendar, versus having someone who's able to kind of manage that and focus on that.
I love that one. It's
okay. So we did this. We did this today, and we had some similarities, but we had a lot of differences. So I ask you this every time you come on, but I'm going to ask you again. What's one life hack you have for us on how we can live our lives that much more free from dysfunction?
I thought about this on the way over, and my life hack is around tombstones and intentionality.
Okay.
So here we go.
Yeah.
I think we've got 2 paths in life. One is we work all of our life to get to our gravestone, our tombstone. And on it, it says, he or she had a great career. And that's not really a quality existence. You've worked your whole life and it's all about your career. And who wants to be known for having a great career? But there's another path. And this tombstone could read, he served God, he served his family, he served his community, he served his friends, he was known for being a kind heart. That's a different path, but they both require intentionality. And we talked earlier about time management also being about the quality of the time. So my encouragement is try to figure out which one of those paths you're on and what the epitaph is going to say, and then really be thoughtful about where you spend your time. I would opt for the second one. I suggest you would too, and most of your readers would too. But if we don't get intentional about it, the first one could happen by accident, and that would be a tragedy.
Yeah, totally. Awesome. Fantastic. Nice a big kind of a existential life hack.
You didn't know where I was going with the tombstones, did you?
No, it was good. Took a little turn. So if folks want to learn more about you, follow you, connect with you, where can they go?
Serviumpartners.com, or you can follow me on LinkedIn. And as always, a pleasure to be on your show. Thank you.
Randy, thank you for coming on, as usual. Okay, so that's all our time we have today. Thank you all for listening and watching. Catch a new show each Sunday at 7:30 p.m. on iTunes.thebrandonsmithshow.com and live on Facebook.com/Brandon Smith WPT for Workplace Therapist. And if you've enjoyed today's show, and we certainly hope you have, please rate, review, and subscribe on iTunes. That's how people find out about us. And the more listeners, the better, because that's more people bringing light to the workplace and making our lives better each and every day. So thank you again for listening and watching. Until the next time we connect, have a great week and an awesome life.